My name is Marilyn. I'm 67 years old and have a modest home in Aurora, Illinois, where the autumn wind pours in through the cracks in the porch and washes away memories I'd sometimes rather forget. I was a wife for 40 years, mother for even longer, and when my son needed a kidney, I said yes, without batting an eyelid, without asking for anything in return. But tell me something. Would you donate a part of your body to someone who hides a secret about their disease? Because I was lying on a stretcher, ready to enter the operating room, when my 9-year-old grandson came running, crying, with an old cell phone in his hand. "Grandma, listen to that first," was all he said. And at that moment, the world I thought I knew turned to dust. If you've ever had the feeling that something doesn't fit, that there's something wrong where there should be love, you'll understand. Sometimes, the ones we love the most are the ones who hurt the most, and the worst, with a smile on their face. Today, I'm going to tell you what no one imagines, and in the end, you will understand why silence can also be a form of justice. But before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know one thing. Not all betrayal comes with screams. Some come with silence and white coat. I was already on the stretcher, with my blue apron, my arm held by the hospital bracelet. The lights in the operating room blinded me, and the anesthesiologist was preparing to erase me from the world for a few hours. But before the needle touched my skin, the door flew open and my grandson Caleb rushed in. 9 years, a sweet boy, and in his eyes, it had something that no child should carry. "Grandma, listen to that first." He trembled, with an old cell phone in his hands. And what I heard on that device, it made me see a truth that my heart had tried to deny for months. If you've ever felt that something was wrong, but lacked the courage to confirm it, you'll understand what I experienced. And if my outburst touches your heart, I ask you, stay with me until the end of this story. Press the like button, subscribe to the channel, because telling this is not easy. But knowing that there are people on the other side listening to me, feeling with me, already gives me the strength to continue. Thank you for being here. Life here in Fox Valley, in the heart of Aurora, has always been simple. I wake up early, prepare my coffee calmly, butter the bread like someone who caresses a child, and then I sit there, sitting on the porch, watching the sun hit the trees as if it were a blessing. On Sundays, I walk to the city's fair. Everyone knows me around here. "Good morning, Mrs. Marilyn," the neighbors shout, and I smile back. Most don't know the pain I carry, but it's better this way. There is pain that is ours, period. The house is modest, but every corner holds history. The kitchen curtain was sewn by me, with fabric left over from an old dress. The hallway picture frame still shows Joe smiling with that silly look from the day we fished in Naperville Lake. He left 6 years ago, taken by Alzheimer's. At first I forgot names, then the way home, and in the end, he even forgot about me, but I never forgot him. Since then, loneliness has taken up residence. My children, each one followed their own path. David married Amanda and went to live on the other side of town. Thomas lives in Rockford, works a lot and cares little. The truth is that, after the children grow up, we become silence at the end of the line. But thank God I have Caleb. Caleb is my grandson, David's son. She is 9 years old and has a heart that does not fit in her chest. He likes to come here after school, especially on Wednesdays when I make chocolate chip cookies. The recipe was my mother's. We play dominoes on the porch table, and he always cheats with that crooked smile. I pretend I don't see it, just to hear his laugh. He is my light, the joy that still lives in this house. But even in the calm, sometimes the wind changes direction. I began to notice little things. Amanda, my daughter-in-law, has always been reserved with me, but she started to get dry, cold. Every time I called, she was the one who answered. David is resting. David is working. David can't speak right now. At first I thought it was just tiredness, but Mother feels it, and when I finally could hear my son's voice, he sounded weak, distant, like he wasn't really there. It was on a Friday that Amanda showed up at my door. It didn't even hit. It just went in. His eyes were red, like someone who cried or fought. He said that David was sick, that his kidneys were failing, that the doctors were worried, and that the only chance for him to survive was a transplant. I froze. She looked at me steadily. He said that they had done the tests, and that, among all the family members, Only I was compatible. You understand, don't you, Marilyn? It's your son. You are the only hope. At that moment, my heart skipped in a strange way, not because of the fear of donating a kidney, but for something in her voice, something I couldn't name, a hurry, a lack of heat. I can't explain it, but a mother's instinct is smart. Even so, I said yes. I kept that in my head for the rest of the night. I remembered David's birth, when he almost didn't breathe and the doctors put him in my arms when he was still purple. I remembered the day he fell off his bike and I spent the night sitting next to his bed changing the ice pack. I remembered the wedding, when he thanked me with a tight hug and said, "Mom, everything I am is because of you." How could I say no? But even among sweet memories, a bitter doubt began to be born. Caleb kept coming to my house, but he was quieter. He looked a lot at his father's cell phone, which he carried hidden in his backpack. One day, unintentionally, he said, "Mommy fights with Dad over the hidden medicine." I asked him what it was, but he changed the subject. And my head started working nonstop. My days remained the same, watering the garden, sewing clothes for the neighbors, making soup on the Sabbath. But inside, something had already changed. Because when a mother feels that there is something wrong with a child, she begins to investigate, even if in silence. I want to pause here to ask you something. Have you ever had the feeling that something was wrong but weren't sure? Have you ever lived that moment when the heart speaks louder than logic? If you've been through this, write a simple sentence here in the comments, just so I know I'm not alone. It can be, "I've lived it," or "It's true," or even, "It touched me," because when we share pain, it weighs less. And it was there, between tea, between the sound of the sewing machine and Caleb's suppressed laughter, that my intuition began to scream. Because as much as Amanda tried to control everything, the pieces didn't fit. She talked too much about the transplant. He called doctors, sent emails in front of me, but he never let David speak. And that, it hurt me like an invisible needle. The day of the surgery was approaching, and that's when something happened. Something that started small, but that turned on a red light right in the middle of my kitchen. Caleb, once again, arrived with his father's cell phone in his hands. Only this time, he wanted to show me something, and what I heard, even without understanding everything at the time, made me feel a shiver in the depths of my soul. But what had that boy discovered? And why did Amanda seem so desperate for the surgery to happen as soon as possible? Deep down, I already knew something very wrong was about to come to light, and when it came, there would be no turning back. After that day when Caleb tried to show me what was on his father's phone, I started to look at everything with different eyes. It was as if a veil had fallen from the front of my face, and I, for the first time, was seeing what I had previously made a point of ignoring. David was noticeably weaker. His face, once full of color, now always looked pale, haggard. He walked slowly, as if his body weighed more than he could bear. Amanda said that it was normal, that the kidneys were failing, and that this really caused a lot of fatigue, a lot of pain. But every time I asked about the exams, she looked away, as if hiding something. "It's all under control, Marilyn. Trust the doctors," she said, with that tone too sweet to be real. And when I insisted, she changed the subject or got angry, saying that I was stressing her husband. And he barely spoke. He seemed anesthetized. That hurt me. Davi was always talkative, affectionate. Now it was just silence and tiredness, a silence that pierced me like a dull knife. Caleb was also no longer the same. He had always been a happy boy, but now he was strange, too quiet. He asked questions that did not match his age. "Grandma, why can medicine that is to cure also make a person sick? Or, if a person takes the wrong medicine, they may need a new organ?" I tried to answer in my own way, but the truth is that these questions left me cold inside. What was that boy seeing? Hearing? Feeling? Something there was out of place. I started to notice the visits. Amanda almost never let me go to their house. He always made an excuse. "Today is not a good day. David is very tired. We are in the hospital." But when she came here, she always had a black folder in her hands, those zippered ones, full of papers that she never let me touch. And her way with David. Before, she caressed, cared for her carefully. Now it was more of a kind of surveillance. She controlled everything, from the time of the meds to the conversations he could have. And if he tried to say something deeper, she would soon interrupt. One day, I saw with my own eyes that she took the cell phone from his hand in the middle of a sentence. "You need to rest, dear," she said, with a forced sweetness that made my stomach churn. On one of the afternoons Caleb came here, he brought his father's cell phone hidden. He showed me a part of an audio, but the sound was low, and he seemed nervous. Mom told no one to hear that. I tried to squeeze it to hear better, but he snatched the device from my hand, afraid. And then he said, "I think she's hiding something from Daddy." That was like a punch. My heart raced. "What's she hiding, Caleb?" I asked, almost breathless. He lowered his eyes. "I don't know, but she fights a lot with him because of the hidden medicine." After that, he was silent, and so did I. That night, lying in my bed, I stared at the ceiling and remembered the times David hugged me tight as a child, telling me I was the strongest woman in the world. I always thought that being strong was to endure everything in silence. But there, that night, I began to understand that sometimes being strong is asking questions, even when you are afraid of the answer. A few days later, Amanda came to pick me up for a pre-op appointment with David. On the way to the hospital, she couldn't stop talking about protocols, exams, appointments. I tried to understand, but it was all said so fast, so technical, that it seemed more like a rehearsed speech. When I asked if she could see David's scans, she said, "There's no point in confusing you with medical terms, Marilyn. It's too much." My blood ran cold. Since when can a mother not see her own child's exams? It was on that same day that I heard something that never left my head. I had forgotten my bag in the waiting room and went back to get it. As I walked down the hallway, I saw Amanda on the phone, with her back turned, leaning against the wall, whispering. His voice was low, but clear enough. "Yes, I already have everything in my hands. The tests were successful. All that's missing is the transplant to complete the documentation." She paused, then said, "After that, we can move on with the full report. The case will be perfect." My heart stopped. Report? What tests? Why did everything seem so planned, so cold? I came back slowly, without making a sound. I sat on the aisle bench as if nothing had happened. But inside me, the world was already turning upside down. I started thinking about everything. Caleb's questions, the hidden medicines, the papers Amanda wouldn't let me see, the exams I was never shown, the evasive answers, the haste, the control. It all felt like part of something bigger, something that I still couldn't name, but that I could already feel in my guts. That night, I went to bed early. The wind was hitting the windows as if it wanted to wake me up from a bad dream. And maybe it was even a warning, because deep in my chest, something told me, there's something big coming, something that will change everything you think you know about your family. And when that truth comes out, it will be too late to turn back. But I still had a chance. I just needed to know where to step before the ground disappeared for good. And the question that kept popping into my head was, how far is a person capable of going, when what is at stake is not love, but ambition? The diagnosis came on a cloudy Monday, one of those that seemed to already carry sadness in the wind. The doctor spoke calmly, but the words hit me like stones in my chest. Kidney failure at an advanced stage. The transplant needs to be done as soon as possible. David was sitting next to me, pale, his eyes sunken, and Amanda was standing behind him, holding his shoulders as if he were a prize she needed to protect or control. I could barely breathe. It was my son there, my boy, and he was dying inside. The world around me stopped for a moment, and I could only hear my heart saying, "You have to do something." The tests were carried out in the same week, one after the other. Too fast, if you ask me. Amanda wasted no time. I signed papers, organized exams, called doctors. Everything revolved around her. I just obeyed. When the result of the compatibility came out, she came to me with a smile that didn't match the moment. "Only you are compatible, Marilyn. It is the only option. But of course, being a mother, you already know what you have to do, right?" She said it as someone who delivers a shopping bag, not a life sentence. I looked at her and replied quietly, "Of course. He is my son." But inside, I trembled. From that moment on, everything started to happen too quickly. Amanda took the reins of everything, and I began to realize that it wasn't just control, it was exclusion. She would schedule meetings with doctors without telling me. He answered questions for me. I talked to nurses as if I were a child who didn't know what I was doing. One day at the hospital reception, they called me to sign a document that I had never seen. When I asked about the content, Amanda replied in front of everyone, "It's just protocol, Marilyn. It doesn't complicate things." And then he turned his back as if he had ended the conversation. But the worst was yet to come. The following week, Amanda showed up here at home with her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Lawson. I hadn't seen them in years. Not even at my husband's funeral did they show up. They entered without asking permission, with that air of superiority that they always carried. Mrs. Lawson sat on my couch as if it were hers. Mr. Lawson stood, arms crossed, and then he began. "Marilyn, we know it's not an easy decision, but it's your son, and as a mother, it is your duty." His wife added, "That's what any true American mother would do." I was speechless. It was as if they were judging me, pushing me against the wall of my own house, telling me that I should prove my love with flesh and blood. Amanda, of course, just watched, with arms crossed, smiling with her eyes. That night was the worst I've ever experienced since I buried my husband. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my hands that have already held my newborn son, who cleaned wounds, packed tears, held bills, carried groceries. Now those same hands were being pressured to sign a paper that could change everything. And it wasn't for his health. Not only that, it was because of fear, by guilt, for the idea that if I said no, I would be a bad mother, a selfish woman. It was an emotional trap. The next day, I went to their house with a basket of soup and bread. I wanted to see David. Amanda took a long time to let me in, but she gave in. He was on the couch, weak, and when he saw me, he cried. He said he was afraid, that he was in pain, that he didn't want to die. I hugged him, and I swear to God, at that moment I would have given anything for him. Anything. But when I went to get him water, I went into the kitchen and saw Amanda on the phone. She didn't realize I was there. He said, "Yes, the donor has already been confirmed. Just convince the old woman to accelerate. We cannot miss the study window." I froze. Study? What study? This wasn't just about saving David. There was something else there. Another intention. I returned home not knowing what to think. Caleb was waiting for me on the porch with 2 glasses of juice. I sat next to him, held his little hand, and asked, "Do you trust your mother?" He hesitated. He lowered his eyes, and he said, "She said that sometimes we need to do bad things for the greater good." That hurt, as if his every word was a splinter entering my heart. I knew it. Something was wrong, very wrong. And then came the day when Amanda took me to an appointment that, according to her, was mandatory. But when we got there, I realized that it was another step in the pre-surgical screening. She had already marked everything, as if I had officially accepted. I signed the papers silently, but with cold hands, because at that moment, even with all the doubts, I still believed that maybe, just maybe, all that was really for the sake of my son. But was it really? Was I about to save David's life? Or to hand mine to people who just wanted to use my body as a piece of medical report? And worse, what else did Amanda hide? And how far would she be able to go to get what she wanted? Life sometimes squeezes us in a way that even breathing hurts. And that's how I felt in the days following that visit with the Lawsons, pressed, trapped inside my own skin. He woke up with the sun beating down on his face, but his chest dawned dark. I did my tasks automatically. I watered the garden, folded other people's clothes that I sewed with care, but my head kept trying to put together the pieces of that puzzle that only showed me edges. After so much insistence, after so much pressure disguised as concern, I went to the hospital and signed the consent form. The pen trembled in my hand. He did not tremble for fear of the surgery. It was fear that I was doing everything for the wrong reasons. But I thought of David, in the baby who almost died when he was born, in the boy who wrote notes to me with spelling mistakes and a heart drawn at the end. I thought of the man who still called me Mom, with that voice I knew better than mine, and I signed it. Amanda seemed to be expecting that. On the same day, he organized everything with an efficiency that didn't smell good to me. He scheduled new appointments, confirmed the date of hospitalization, even sent a message to a doctor from outside the state, who I had never heard of. "Now we can go ahead with the complete plan," she said, without even looking me in the eye. I just shook my head. Inside, it was just silence, a heavy silence which ran through the bones. Thomas, my youngest son, called me that evening. He said he wanted to come to Aurora to talk to me. I felt that something was off. He was always sensitive, Thomas. But I, at that moment, did not have the courage to open the box of truth. "It's okay, my son. Just a scare. I'm going to donate the kidney to your brother and everything will be fine." It hurt to hide, but I still believed that, even with all the signs, maybe it was just paranoia on my part, that I was too old, too tired, too sensitive. But the one who really saw everything was Caleb. He walked differently. His eyes, which always sparkled when we played dominoes, now carried a sadness that didn't match his 9 years. He started walking with his father's cell phone up and down. She slept with him under her pillow, and whenever I asked what was in that device, he looked away. "It's just a game, Grandma," but I knew it wasn't. Nobody protects a game like that. One afternoon, we sat together on the porch. The sun was going down and the sky had a color of tiredness, just like mine. I offered him a cookie. He refused. He just stood there, quietly, with his cell phone on his lap. I looked at him and said, "Caleb, do you trust your grandmother?" He replied with a nod. "Then tell me what you know." He looked at me for a few seconds, but he said nothing. She just pressed her cell phone to her chest and muttered, "You'll understand at the right time, Grandma." That gave me goosebumps, because children don't talk like that by chance. And I'm here, opening my heart, telling all this with a lump in my throat. If you're still listening, if you've come this far with me, leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel. It's not out of vanity. It's because I still have a lot to tell you. Something I never told anyone. And just knowing that there is someone listening on the other side, it already consoles me. That night, alone in my bed, I looked up at the ceiling and said out loud, "Joe, if you're still around, give me a sign." I asked for it quietly, between tears that I didn't even realize were flowing. And maybe he heard me, because the next day, everything started to fall apart. Amanda appeared here again, hurried, nervous. He brought more papers, more orders, more haste. But that day, Caleb did something he had never done before. He entered the room while she was talking to me, holding the cell phone tightly, and looked straight at his mother. He didn't say a word. It just stayed there. Amanda turned pale. He swallowed. And for the first time, he left home faster than he entered. And it was at that moment, in the silence of that gesture, that I understood. Something great was about to be revealed. Something Caleb knew. Something Amanda feared. Something that maybe change everything I thought I knew about my own family. But what was on that cell phone? And why did Amanda act as if time was against her? What she was trying to hide so urgently? And that only a child would have the courage to show? On the eve of the surgery, I woke up earlier than usual. The sky was still dark, and the coffee seemed more bitter. I got out of bed as if saying goodbye, and that's exactly what I started to do. I looked at every corner of the house as if it were the last time. I folded the dish towels carefully, arranged my sewing threads, watered the plants just the way Joe liked them, and then I sat on the edge of the bed with an envelope in my hand. Inside it, a letter. I wrote to Caleb. Simple words, as only Grandma can write. "If one day you miss me, open this letter. And if you remember the smell of my orange cake, the noise of dominoes falling on the table, then you'll know that Grandma never really left." I folded the paper with trembling hands, kissed the envelope, and kept it in the dresser drawer, along with a photo of me and him on the balcony. Then I went to the cemetery. I brought flowers to Joe, the same color as when he asked me to marry him. I sat there on the ground, between dry leaves and silence. "Would you do it differently, Joe?" I asked. "Would you donate without asking anything? Would you accept all this haste without being surprised?" The wind blew hard. I don't know if it was an answer, but it made every last white hair on my head stand on end. I stayed there a little longer, in silence, trying to feel some peace. But what I felt was anguish. It was as if my body said yes, but my soul screamed no. At night, the house seemed to breathe along with me. Every creak of the wood sounded like a warning. I was already in my nightgown, packing the last details of the suitcase. A change of clothes, a soap I like, a photo of the little boys. That's when I heard footsteps. Low, hurried. I left the room and saw the hallway light on. I went to the living room, and there was Caleb. In his pajamas, with his eyes wide, standing in front of his mother's closet. He held a brown briefcase, and his fingers trembled. When he saw me, he dropped everything on the ground and ran. I tried to call him, but he had already gone upstairs and locked the bedroom door. I stood there, looking at that open folder on the floor, but before I could crouch, Amanda appeared. "He sometimes sleeps walking, Marilyn. Everything is under control. He took the briefcase in a hurry and disappeared down the corridor. But I saw it. I saw when she hid his cell phone inside her purse, and I saw the fear in my grandson's eyes. The next morning, I was ready. Shower taken, hair tied up with an old brooch that belonged to my mother. Sitting on the porch, drinking an almost cold coffee, waiting for Amanda to pick me up. But who appeared first was Brandon. My youngest son, who almost never came, got out of the car looking like he had heard the news the hard way. And he really did. "Mom, why didn't you tell me you were going to have this surgery?" I choked. "How did you know?" He showed his cell phone. Amanda had posted on one of these fundraising pages on the internet. Help a mother save her child's life with a gesture of love. Photo of me, lying in the hospital, smiling. I didn't even remember taking that picture. I felt exposed, used. Brandon sat next to me. "This is all very strange, Mom. The speed of it, the way Amanda is running everything. Are you sure you want to do that?" I wanted to say no, that something bothered me from the beginning, that Caleb's voice echoed in my dreams. But what came out of my mouth was a whisper. "He's my son, Brandon. If I don't do it for him, who would?" Brandon took my hand, squeezed it hard. "You've done everything for him, Mom. Everything. But that shouldn't be like that." We were silent for a few minutes. The silence of mother and son who know that something is wrong, but do not know how to fix it. And deep down, I felt like my time was running out. Not life, but to pretend that there was no secret behind that door. And maybe he was about to open it up on his own, because there was still a piece missing from this puzzle, and she came from a place where I least expected it. Would my grandson show me the truth? Before it was too late. I arrived at the hospital that morning with my heart like a shard of glass. Each step in the hallway reminded me that I was about to give away a piece of my body, not knowing if I was saving or feeding a lie. Amanda walked beside me with the same hurry as always, talking to the reception, signing documents, checking everything as if she were the one donating the kidney. I just followed, the downcast gaze, the silence on the lips, and inside, a storm. I was taken to the preoperative exam ward, where they would do the last test before the surgery scheduled for the next day. And it was there that something happened that I will never forget. A veteran nurse, one of those who have seen it all, approached with a gentle smile. "Donna Marilyn, right? Are you going to donate to your son? How beautiful. That force is yours." I smiled back, "Little one." And that's when she looked at Amanda and blurted out unceremoniously, "Look who's here again. You are that girl who came with the boy with symptoms of poisoning, remember? A few months ago. I thought it was your brother." Amanda froze for a second. Just a second. But I saw it. She disguised it with an embarrassed smile and replied too quickly, "Oh no. It must be confusing me." The nurse looked again, a little suspiciously, and walked away muttering, "Strange." I remember her face. And there, at that moment, everything inside me screamed. I didn't say anything, but my whole body reacted. I felt a twinge in the pit of my stomach, as if I had swallowed a stone. Poisoning? Months ago? Has Amanda been here with another man? What did that mean? And why did she never mention anything like that? I entered the exam room with my blood boiling. Amanda stayed outside, and for the first time in weeks, I wanted to stay away from her. She felt as if she were next to a snake disguised as a caretaker. When I returned to the temporary room they had given me, Amanda left to answer a call. He left his bag on the table. I looked at her for a few seconds. I don't usually mess with anyone's things. I never liked that. But there, at that moment, I knew I needed to see it, like someone looking for air to breathe. I opened it slowly, without making a sound. I had a folder with medical documents, some old prescriptions, exams, but at the bottom of his bag, wrapped in a handkerchief, a small plastic bottle, without a label, unnamed, without anything, a bottle with half a clear liquid. I held it with trembling hands. What was that? Why hide? What kind of medicine or substance does one keep like this, as one who hides sin? It was there that the doubt became certainty. Amanda was hiding something, and it was not small. It was big, dirty, dark, the kind of thing that, if discovered, changes lives. My knees started shaking. I kept everything as it was before she returned, but my heart was already beating like a drum. When she entered the room, with that fake smile on her face, asking if I wanted water, I could only look into her eyes and see someone else. A stranger. a woman who, in some way, could be behind my son's illness. That night, already lying in the hospital bed, I turned to the side and tried to sleep, but his eyes did not close. The ceiling seemed to stare back at me, and the silence was so loud that it hurt. I relived every detail of the conversation with the nurse, the nameless bottle, Caleb's gaze, and it all made too much sense to be a coincidence. I had spent weeks trying to convince my heart that it was overkill, motherly paranoia, but now, I knew it. Amanda didn't just want to save David. She was behind his illness, and maybe, what she really wanted, was to finish what he started. You who are listening to me, promise me something. Stay with me until the end, because I know this story is hurting. In me, especially. But the most memorable moment will still come, the one that will make everything fall into place. And when he arrives, I promise you will understand why certain truths only appear when we stop being afraid to see. The next morning, Caleb showed up at the hospital, and the way he looked at me, it was different from all the other looks. It was as if he knew the time had come, and when he took that old cell phone out of his pocket and said to me, "Grandma, I can't keep this alone anymore," I knew everything was going to change. But what had he kept for so long in that device? And will the truth he was going to reveal? Would it be enough to prevent what Amanda planned so much? That morning, after Caleb handed me the phone with sweaty hands and eyes charged with childlike courage, I couldn't open the file right away. It was as if my body needed one last breath before facing what I already knew deep in my soul. I asked him to stay there, sitting next to me in the hospital armchair, while I closed my eyes for a moment. And it was in that silence, with the weight of the world on my shoulders, that my mind took me back, like my heart wants to remember, who I was before I was just called a donor. I found myself in my early 20s, walking the icy streets of Naperville with my shoes on my feet and a cold lunchbox under my arm. I worked as a cleaner in a commercial building. I cleaned the floor where no one noticed. I came home late, with my feet throbbing, and still found the strength to make dinner. Joe always waited for me on the porch, with little David on his lap, wrapped in a blanket. "Mommy has arrived," he said, with that smile that still breaks me inside. There were nights when I didn't even sleep. David was sick, fragile, caught everything that was flu and bronchitis. I sat next to his bed, exchanging cold cloths on my forehead, praying softly that God wouldn't take my boy. And do you know what he said to me one day, with that little voice hoarse with fever? "When I grow up, you'll never have to work again, Mom. I'll take care of you." This phrase haunted me all my life. It was what kept me going. On simple birthdays, when the cake was made of ready-made dough and colored sugar icing, but he blew out the candles as if it were the biggest cake in the world. In the tight Christmases, when the gift was a pair of new socks and a tight hug, and even when he grew up, got married and started to move away, I kept that promise like someone who keeps a jewel. My son was going to take care of me, because I took care of him with everything I had. And now, look at this. I was there, in a hospital bed, about to give a kidney, a piece of me, and it wasn't even treated as an act of love. It was a duty. Amanda spoke as if I had an obligation, as if it were natural to donate an organ and still be grateful for the opportunity. Not a sincere thank you, nor a gesture of affection, only demand, coldness, silence. No, sometimes what hurts is not what the person does. That's what she fails to do. A look of gratitude, a "Mommy, I love you," a gesture of affection. It costs so little, and it's worth so much. Sorry to stop here for a moment, but let me ask you something that is listening to me. Have you ever felt like you gave everything for someone, and in the end were treated as if you had done nothing? That your love was used, not valued? If you've been through this, comment below with a "I know how it is," or a "I understand you." Sometimes, just knowing that we are not alone in this pain, it already helps to move forward. On that bed, with Caleb's cell phone still in my hand, I felt a mixture of sadness and anger that I had never felt before. It was as if all that past, all the sleepless nights, all the years of renunciation, all the makeshift cakes and childish promises, had been wiped off the map by a woman who only saw numbers, exams, and control. But there was still a chance to understand what was really behind it all. And that chance was there, in the palm of my hand, in the form of an old, scratched cell phone that he kept a secret that my grandson could no longer carry alone. What was in that file? And would I, after hearing it, still have the courage to lie down on that stretcher the next day? That morning, the hospital was a desert of dim lights and icy corridors. The world slept. Except me. The pillow was too hard, the blanket too light, the thought too heavy. I turned from one side to the other until I couldn't take it anymore. I got up slowly, put on the blue robe that the nurse had left hanging, and went to the bedroom window. I sat there, with a cup of tea that wasn't even hot anymore, and stared at the faded city. The distant lights looked like sad stars, and at that moment, I felt the size of dust, invisible. What hurt me was not only the fear of surgery, it was emptiness. The feeling that everything had been taken away from me, even the right to know the truth. The memory of the nurse talking about the other patient, the bottle hidden in Amanda's bag, and now, that phrase she said on the phone earlier. After the transplant, the protocol will be completed. She spoke as if I wasn't listening, but I listened. Every word, and they ached like blades. Protocol? What protocol? Since when did saving a child become part of a larger plan? A protocol to be finalized? I stood there, alone, trying to pick up the pieces. And it was then that I heard small footsteps in the hallway. The door opened slowly, and Caleb walked in with Captain America's t-shirt and eyes swollen with sleep. He said nothing. He just came to me and sat at my feet, leaning his head on my knee. We stayed like this for a while, just the sound of the clock ticking and the tea cooling even more in my hand. He looked at me with that look that only grandchildren have, the one that crosses our souls. And he said quietly, "You're the best grandma in the world." And then he began to cry, a silent cry, which came from within, as if he knew a pain that no child should carry. I placed the cup on the railing and wrapped it in my arms. We stayed like this, hugging without saying a word, but the heart spoke loudly. He was shaking, and so was I. It was in that hug that I understood. As much as everything seemed lost, I still had him, my grandson. The truth was still in the air, suspended between what he knew and what I feared. And in that silence, something changed in me, something ignited. I didn't know exactly what, but something told me that the next day, before the surgery, the truth would finally come out. But what exactly had Caleb kept for so long? And why did Amanda need it so much that I never knew? That morning, when the sun had barely touched the roof of the hospital, I put on my clothes calmly. I chose a light-colored blouse, a long cotton skirt, and tied my hair up with the mother-of-pearl bobby pin Joe gave me on our second wedding anniversary. It was not vanity. It was dignity. I needed to look in the mirror and remember who I was. Not a piece within a plan. Not a body to be used. I was Marilyn, the woman who loved, who raised children, who lost her husband to Alzheimer's, but never lost faith. And that now, he decided, for the first time in a long time, to act for himself. I asked the nurse not to call Amanda yet. He said he wanted to go to the hospital chapel before the surgery. She nodded, respectfully, but I didn't go to pray. I walked out of a side door, into the cab I had already booked the day before, a choice I made in silence, right after Caleb's crying. The driver didn't ask anything. He only followed the address I gave, the office of Mr. Donovan, a retired lawyer who took care of the papers of Mrs. Helen, an old sewing friend, now deceased. When I arrived, he received me with the kindness of someone who recognizes suffering on a woman's face. I went in, took the documents out of my bag, Joe's will, copies of the medical tests, David's history of illness, everything I could gather without arousing suspicion. I put it on the table, took a deep breath, and said, "Mr. Donovan, I can't explain everything to you right now, but if something happens to me in the next 48 hours, you contact my son Thomas. He lives in Rockford. The number is here. Tell him that my life has value, and that he needs to listen to what is inside these rolls." He looked at me with concern, but asked no questions. He just nodded, slowly. "I'll do it, Marilyn. Word of an ancient man." I gave a faint smile, perhaps the first in days. I left there lighter, but with my heart still heavy for what lay ahead. I went back to the hospital before Amanda noticed my absence. She was at the front desk, checking papers, annoyed by something on the phone. He didn't see me coming. As I approached, she gave me a quick, evaluative look. "You're gone." I just said, "I went to pray." And for the first time, lying to her seemed necessary. She did not answer. She went back to playing with her cell phone as if she were calculating the minutes of a clock that only she knew where it went. They directed me back to the room. The nurses began preparations. The bracelet on the arm, the apron, the apple. I looked at everything as if it wasn't me, my body present, but my soul somewhere else. Because in that moment, something inside me had changed. I was no longer going to be led as an object. I wasn't going to donate a kidney just because someone expected me to obey in silence. And if the world did not want to listen to my voice, then it would listen to my attitudes. And forgive me for taking this break now, but if this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, help me carry it forward? Like and subscribe here to the channel. It makes more difference than you think. Because telling this story heals me, but maybe it can also heal you from something inside. And look, there is still a lot to happen. The strongest still comes. Lying on the stretcher, ready to be taken to the operating room, I looked at the ceiling and took a deep breath. Amanda was there next to her, impatient with the delay. Caleb, sitting in a corner, held his cell phone as if holding a secret about to explode. And it was then that the sound of hurried footsteps echoed down the hallway. Small, desperate steps. And all I thought was, did he have the courage? Could it be that what was hidden in that device, will it finally be revealed? Brandon arrived at the hospital just hours after what seemed like the beginning of the end. He was serious, silent, with that look of his that always reminded me of his father's. Firm, attentive, but full of feeling kept behind his eyes. He didn't come to visit. He came because he was sniffing something. In the parking lot, even before going up, he had already called me. Mom, there are things that are not matching, and I will not rest until I understand what is happening. When he entered the room, he hugged me tightly. A hug from a son who sees his mother on the edge and refuses to watch in silence. We sat side by side, and he opened the notebook. Amanda is involved with a clinical trial project, Mom. Unofficial. She never commented to anyone. He said he had contacts at a hospital in Milwaukee, remember? I nodded slowly. Well, I went after it. He showed me pictures. Images of her entering a discreet building, with a gray facade. Nothing that resembled an ordinary hospital. This clinic works with pharmacists who are testing substances on patients with kidney failure. Experimental. No FDA clearance. And you know the worst? He turned the screen. There she was. Amanda. Laughing. Hugging a man in a white coat. That's Peter Langdon. He had his registration revoked in 2018 for involvement with illegal medicines. With each word of his, I felt my stomach sink a little deeper. What about David? I asked, almost in a whisper. Brandon took a deep breath. She was documenting his symptoms as part of a report, making it seem like he was a severe case of a rare syndrome. And now, with the transplant, she would complete the protocol. The data would be sold. I closed my eyes for a moment. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just breathed slowly and said, "Go on, son. We don't have everything yet." And he understood. It was not time for despair. It was time for silence. That silence that protects, observes, and prepares. Because when we have lost everything, what remains is the truth. And I knew she was very close to appearing. It was at that moment that I felt Joe's presence. Not in the mystical sense, not as a spirit, but inside me. The memory of him, always so calm in the face of pain, gave me strength. And seeing Brandon there, decisive, brave, I knew that my youngest son was the living heritage of this man who taught me that true justice never comes in a shout. It comes at the right time. And look, if you're still here with me, listening to every detail, I tell you, what you'll soon discover can change the way you view trust, love, and betrayal. Because there are things that, when we hear it for the first time, seem impossible. But when it all comes together, pain becomes lucidity. And that's when we understand. True love is not blind. He sees, and he reacts. Brandon promised me he wouldn't stop there. He said he was going to get documents, testimonies, anything that could unmask Amanda before it was too late. And I, sitting in that hospital bed, prepared myself. Because the time for submission was over. Now was the time of truth. And David? What did he know? Was my own son part of this plan? Or was he also another victim of the woman who claimed to take care of him with such zeal? It was on that gray afternoon, with the sky heavy over Aurora and an icy wind cutting through the hospital windows, that Caleb came back to me with his eyes full of something I still didn't know if it was courage or fear. He entered the room with light steps, holding that same old cell phone, with the cracked screen in the corner and the case faded from so much use. He sat next to me, clutching the device to his chest, as if it were a treasure, or a bomb about to explode. "Grandma," I listened to it unintentionally, but then I recorded it, and I kept it, because I was afraid. But now I know you need to listen. I picked up my cell phone carefully, like someone holding the key to a door I never wanted to open. He showed me where to squeeze. One click. The sound started muffled. Familiar voices, but with a tone I had never heard before. Amanda. Cold. Calculating. Talking to someone on the other end of the line. The effects are slower than expected, but it's still functional. He is weak, yes, but he answers. The more it deteriorates, the more valuable the before and after will be. The data is already aligned. Then a low laugh, and another voice. Older, firmer, cruel. Amanda's mother. This kidney will be the final seal. The report will be worth millions. After that, you and Dr. Langdon will have the name in the right circles. I paused the audio. The hand trembled. Caleb looked at me in silence, waiting for a reaction. But I couldn't say anything. I just hugged him. I shoved him into my chest as if I could protect him from all that. Because at that moment, the truth was not only clear, it was dirty, cruel, real. Amanda was using her own husband as a guinea pig. And I was about to be the last step of this experiment. My kidney, my life, my mother's love, treated like a laboratory piece. And there, in that tight embrace with my grandson, a thought pierced me like an arrow. Some memories are not erased. They stick to us. They get stuck in the skin, in the smell, in the sound. This audio, this afternoon, this moment. I knew they would live with me until the end of my days. And allow me to pause here. I know this story is heavy, but if you've come this far, it's because something inside touched you. So answer me one thing. Have you ever had a moment like this? A memory that never left your head? A secret? A hidden truth? A discovery that changed you forever? If so, write here in the comments. Share with me. Sometimes, sharing the pain is what gives you the strength to carry the rest. I looked at Caleb again. That boy, so small, had carried the burden that many adults would never have the courage to face. He looked at me with guilt, as if he thought he had done something wrong. But I held his little face in my hands and said, "You saved Grandma, and maybe have saved your father too." Amanda's voice sounded down the hallway, asking if I was ready. I took a deep breath, hid the cell phone inside my bag, and said yes. But inside, everything was no longer. I would no longer be part of her plan. What would I do from then on? It would have to be fast, silent, and accurate. But how to prevent a surgery scheduled for a few minutes from now, in a system that was already dominated by it? Who would listen to me before it was too late? The hospital's meeting room wasn't big, but this morning it felt too cramped. White light on the ceiling, smell of printed paper, and tension in the air. I sat at the end of the table, as if I was invisible there, only this time I wasn't. Brandon stood behind me, his arms crossed. Amanda arrived with her document folder, her lab coat over her tight dress, her cell phone vibrating in her pocket as if the world was about to fall, and she still had control of everything. The doctors entered. Dr. Nguyen, the anesthesiologist, a small but attentive man, 2 nurses I already knew by sight, and Dr. Stein, responsible for the clinical protocol. Amanda distributed papers. Update of consent, new adjustments in induction dosing and postoperative observation. She said it as if talking about a cake recipe. When the paper arrived in front of me, I didn't reach out. There was silence, tense. And then, in the calm voice I've learned to have after years of swallowing injustice, I said, "I'm not going to sign." Amanda smiled yellow. "Mom, it's just a technical adjustment. Nothing that..." And I interrupted, still without raising my tone. "I will not sign anything else without my lawyer present." The pen was still on the table, my eyes fixed on hers. Brandon stepped forward. "These medications that are being given to my brother, is there a record of origin? Have they been approved by the FDA? What is their name? Why aren't they in the original medical documents?" Dr. Nguyen frowned. He looked at Amanda, then to Dr. Stein. The tension rose like a tide. Amanda tried to compose herself. "These issues are not up to the family. Medicine has its protocols. Brandon slammed his hand on the table. That's exactly what we're questioning. The protocols. The anesthesiologist's gaze changed. For the first time, he didn't seem comfortable. Mrs. Lawson, he said, would it be possible to review the patient's medication records? I administered the last painkillers myself, but I was not informed of any experimental substances. Amanda swallowed. The eyes were all on her now, and I just watched. For the first time, she lost control. There's a misunderstanding here, she said, and tried to smile, but it was too late. The doubt had been planted. Dr. Stein closed the portfolio. Maybe we should suspend this procedure until everything is clear. Hospital ethics demand it. Amanda pursed her lips. I wanted to scream. I saw it in her eyes. But to scream at that moment would be to admit it. She was cornered. I got up slowly. I looked into the eyes of everyone there. I'm not here to prevent my son's healing, but I don't accept being used. Not even deceived. No more. If it's to save someone, let it be with truth. And it was at that moment that Amanda's cell phone vibrated again. She tried to ignore it, but Brandon reached out. Answer. It can be important. She hesitated, took the device and left in a hurry, saying that it was from the administrative sector. But we knew that at that moment, her castle was beginning to collapse. And I didn't feel hatred. I felt relief. Because the truth, when it starts to come out of the shadows, can be slow, but no one holds it for long. The meeting was adjourned, the surgery was suspended, and everyone left in silence. But I knew Amanda wasn't going to stop there. And what would come next? Would it be even more revealing than I could have imagined? I woke up before sunrise, with that peace that only comes after the inner storm. The room was dark, but I could see everything more clearly than ever. There was no more room for doubt inside me. I put on my clothes slowly, put on the same blue sweater I wore on David's 9th birthday when he fell off his bike, and I spent the afternoon taking care of his scraped knee in the backyard. Remembering this gave me strength. I grabbed my bag, arranged my hair in the mirror, and looked into my own eyes. I knew what I had to do, and it was now. I went down the hospital corridor and went straight to the administration. I asked to speak to the person in charge on duty. He was a polite man, with a crooked tie and attentive eyes. I handed him an envelope. Inside there is a recording. Listen carefully. If you still want to go through with this surgery, you won't need my signature, because I myself won't be here anymore. He opened his mouth, surprised, but I didn't expect a reaction. I just added, that's all you need to understand why I'm refusing. He nodded slowly, and I walked away like someone leaving a bomb on the table, but a real bomb, made up of voices, evidence, and justice. I returned to the room. Caleb slept, curled up on the couch. Brandon was leaning against the wall, his eyes red with wakefulness. I touched his arm. It's time. He looked at me, understood without me saying anything else. We went down together to the floor of the surgery. Amanda was already there, anxious, pacing back and forth with the clipboard in her hands. When he saw me, he came towards me with the forced sweet tone. Mom, the doctors are ready. I just need your final signature, the release form. He held out the paper to me as if delivering a gift. I took a deep breath. I took a step back, and calmly, he said, I'm not going to sign, and I'm not going to have that surgery. Her face changed. First incredulity, then barely concealed anger. What? Are you kidding? You can't do that. I can, and I'm doing it. The corridor fell silent. Caleb approached me, holding my hand. Brandon stood by me. And then, as in a macabre theater, the Lawson arrived. Amanda's mother with that air of superiority, her father behind like a shadow. You're being selfish, she said. It's a shame as a mother. I turned to her with the serenity that only those who have been beaten by life know how to carry. I was the pillar of this family, for decades, and you used me as a ladder. They pressured me. They deceived me. And now they call me selfish for saying no? Well, no. Today, that ends. Amanda began to cry, first nervous, then furious. You're going to destroy everything. I held my grandson's face with both hands and said in a low but firm voice, what destroys is not the love that refuses. It is love that allows itself to be used until there is nothing left. The administrator arrived soon after, with 2 discreet security guards. He said he had listened to the audio, that the surgery was officially suspended until further notice. Amanda tried to protest, but now the eyes were no longer in her favor. The masks were falling. And I finally felt up, for the first time, without bowing. But what would come after that? Would David know everything? Or did he still carry the shadows of those he trusted most? Amanda lost her tone of sweetness at the time. When she realized that the papers had turned, that the signature would not come, that the eyes around her no longer saw her as a savior, it collapsed. It wasn't subtle. It was an entire fall, made up of screams, agitated hands, and an ugly despair to see. She came to me, her eyes wide and her voice cutting. "You're going to regret it, Mom. Go see what you did to your family." I didn't answer. I just stared at it, because when the truth is already before everyone, silence is the loudest cry. It was then that she tried to pull Caleb in. She grabbed the boy's arm tightly, as if she could still control something with the same violence disguised as zeal. Brandon intervened at the time. He took his son from her arms. "You have lost the right to even call him your own," Amanda screamed. It struggled. The nurses approached. Security was activated. And then, when she saw that neither the pose, nor the screams, nor the last name saved anymore, she did what any manipulator does when exposed: blamed others. It was all their idea. He pointed to his own parents, who stood there, pale, packing their dignity in shameful silence. But it was too late. The Lawsons' name was already in the records of the investigated clinic in Milwaukee. The hospital administrator, serious as a stone, announced that the police were already on their way. And indeed, minutes later, 2 officers entered with documents in their hands. They took Amanda and her parents to a reserved room. A nurse approached me. "Are you okay?" And I just said, "I'm starting to stay." And at that moment, for the first time in years, I felt something that felt peace. There was still a lot of pain, a lot of hurt, a lot to be understood, but the weight that crushed my chest, the former, at least, was beginning to dissolve. The news arrived quickly. The Milwaukee pharmacist was arrested that same day. A dossier with images, videos, and transactions proved that the scheme was much bigger. Illegal tests, application of unauthorized drugs, collection of forged data. Amanda said she did it for the sake of science, but no one listened anymore. The hospital froze her license, and the name she protected so much became synonymous with shame. And look, there are things that we live and keep, but maybe by telling, we help another heart to breathe. So if you're listening to this story and you feel that it can reach someone who needs strength, really, courage, like this video, subscribe here to the channel. This is not just my story, it is the echo of many. And who knows, together, these voices will find others that also need to wake up. Caleb was by my side the whole time. He hugged me without saying a word, as if all we needed was that silence between us. Brandon was called to testify, but returned at the end of the day with calm eyes. "She has no way to escape, Mom." The penny dropped. I nodded, but there was still a doubt gnawing at me inside. And David? What did he know? How innocent was he in this story? Or will it be that he was not innocent at all? The next day, the city woke up different. Aurora was cloudy, but there was a strange light in the air, as if even time had stopped to watch what was to come. Brandon told me in the morning that the hospital would call a press conference. "They want to clear the name of the institution, Mom, to show that they were not accomplices." I understood, but I didn't want a stage. I didn't want a spotlight. All I wanted from the beginning was to save my son. And when I realized that my love was being used as a tool to cover up a crime, I chose not to be silent anymore, but also not to scream. Brandon insisted. She said that people needed to listen, that many other mothers, grandmothers, women like me, deserved to know that they were not alone. I didn't perform at the press conference, but I did. I wrote at dawn, with my hands trembling, sitting in that same rocking chair where I cradled David so many nights as a baby, the same one where I prayed for my husband during the worst days of the disease. I wrote with an open soul, and I handed the letter to Brandon, folded into 4 parts. He read it, in that room full of microphones and cameras. "My name is Marilyn. I'm 67 years old. I was a wife, I was a mother, I was a grandmother. And during all these roles, I gave everything I had. I donated my youth, my dreams, my health. I was ready to donate even one of my kidneys. But I will not give my life to cover up crimes. My love is real, but he is not blind. Let this serve as a warning. Because love without respect turns into silence, and silence can kill. There was silence after the reading, not of contempt, but of respect, of fright, of reverence. The letter was read in the newspapers. It appeared in the Chicago Tribune. Illinois News Channel 9 aired Brandon's speech. And there on the couch in my living room, Caleb would look at me with those big, bright eyes and say softly, "That's my grandma." The local prosecutor's office has opened an official investigation. They said there were clear indications of an illegal clinical trial scheme involving not only Amanda and the Lawsons, but other people in the pharmaceutical field. Her name was suspended from the medical council. The license is canceled. The Milwaukee clinic was sealed. And the processes began to pile up, one after the other, like badly played playing cards. I didn't feel revenge. It wasn't that. What I felt was dignity returning to my body, as if every cell of mine, which had already become accustomed to the weight of abuse disguised as affection, breathed a sigh of relief. The truth came out, and this time, no one could push it under the rug. And this is where I tell you, with my heart in my hands, if you have reached this point in history, know, the strongest is yet to come, because the greatest pain, it didn't come from Amanda, nor the Lawsons. It came from a deeper place. It came from the look that was still waiting for me in the hospital room, a look that I knew since she came into the world. But now, I no longer knew if that look saw me the same way. Did David know everything, or would I still discover one more truth? When Caleb's custody was officially transferred, I felt a relief that I can't even describe. Amanda cried, screamed, tried to plead momentary insanity, tried to say that it was all invention, but there was no one else to believe. The judge looked her straight in the eye and said, "You used your own family as a guinea pig." And that was it. It was the final point she never imagined she would hear. The sentence came quickly. Preventive detention until the trial. They claimed a risk of flight, and rightly so. Because her parents, the Lawsons, did not wait for justice to knock on the door. They disappeared from the city like dust blown by the wind. They left everything behind. The house in Fox River, the furniture, the fraudulent donations, and the traces that now put them at the center of a federal investigation. The house was put up for sale, poster hanging at the gate, to cover legal costs, the newspapers said. I passed by it once, in a car with Brandon, and I confess, it hurt to see that place where I had been treated as an unwanted guest so many times now, empty, faded, with the tall grass and the windows closed as if hiding shame. But life charges. Sometimes it takes time, but it charges. David, my son, he didn't understand for days. When everything exploded, he was still fragile, hospitalized with compromised kidneys and tired body. He was transferred to a rehabilitation center in Springfield, where he could be monitored more cautiously, and above all, away from the shadow of his wife. Brandon was the one who brought the documents to him. He told everything. He showed the videos. He let his brother's own eyes find the truth. And when he finally understood, when the penny dropped, David cried. It wasn't just any cry. Brandon called me the same day, saying, "Mom?" He broke. "It's in pieces." And days later, he himself wanted to see me. I went there. I entered that room clean, with the smell of alcohol and silence. He was sitting in the armchair, thin, haggard, with the sunken eyes of someone who hasn't slept well for weeks. When he saw me, he tried to get up. He couldn't, but he looked up, and in that look, there was something I hadn't seen since he was little. Regret. "Mom, I didn't know. I swear by everything that is most sacred. I only trusted her." Amanda said that everything was normal, that the side effects would pass. I had no idea. He was crying as he spoke. His hands trembled. "You were going to give me the kidney, and I didn't even know what she was capable of. Forgive me." I sat next to him. I took his hand. I looked at that man whom I carried in my arms, whom I nursed, whom I saw taking his first steps on the porch of our old house in Naperville. And what I said was simple. "I forgive you, son, but now you need to heal of many things, and some of them are not physical." I didn't say anything else. I didn't promise a visit every weekend. I didn't say I would forget what I went through. But there, in that silent handshake, I knew something new was beginning, a time when I would no longer be the one who serves, but the one who decides. But before it all ends, There was still one last truth waiting to be revealed, and it would come from where I least expected it. Today, as I was digging the cold earth in the corner of the garden, I smelled the smell of winter going away. Spring has arrived, still shy, but I am from the time when we recognize the signs of life, even when it hides among the ashes. I planted daisies. They were Joe's favorite flowers, on that curve of the balcony where he used to sit, with his cap threadbare and his gaze quiet, almost always looking at nothing. Sometimes I think he's still there, not with the body, of course, but with that presence that we don't explain. We just feel. Caleb ran around the yard with an old cart that Brandon found in the attic and fixed with electrical tape. That boy, my angel. He saw more than he should, understood more than he could, and yet she has a light in her eyes that no trauma has extinguished. Sometimes he looks at me as if to say, I took care of you, and in a way, he really took care of it. He was the one who screamed at the right time, who didn't let my love turn into tragedy. Brandon comes every weekend, now working as an electrician in a city hall project. He brings fresh bread, mows the lawn, mends everything that creaks. But what touches me the most, that's when he sits next to me on the porch and just hangs out, without having to speak. It is in this silence that we understand each other. And in this calm that slowly returned into my house, I sat down yesterday to write a letter. Not for Amanda, nor for Lawson, not even for David. I wrote to my mother, the one who has been gone for more than 30 years. I took old stationery, the ones she used, and wrote it as if she was still on the other side waiting for my words. Dear Mother, today I understand. I understand your silences. I understand why the lady stood so long looking out the window, without saying a word. I understand why, sometimes, I swallowed hard and went back to the stove as if nothing had happened. The lady loved more than she was loved. And yet, he remained firm. Today it was me, and now I know. Forgive me for having judged you in silence. He forgives for not having understood his pain, because today it passed through my body too. And yet, I survived, with dignity, with faith, with her heart in pieces, but with clean hands. I folded the letter carefully, as if closing a wound. I kept it in the old sewing box, the one she gave me when I got married. No, I hadn't slept well for months. The pillow smelled of anguish. The ceiling of my room seemed to fall in every night. But yesterday, for the first time, I took a deep breath, without fear, no guilt. I just breathed. And the moment my eyes closed, I was sure that something still needed to happen, because not everything was said, not everything has been explained, and there was one last thing that only Caleb knew. And he hadn't told me yet. I closed the box slowly, as if closing a chapter that hurt, but taught. Inside were the letters, photos, sewing recipes, and now, my last letter to Mom. I placed them on the shelf in the living room, next to the old portraits. Outside, the wind blew gently and ruffled my white hair, as if to say, you stood up. Caleb was playing in the garden, laughing out loud with that pure way that only children keep after the storm. Brandon was washing his car, sweaty shirt, slight smile. David, still in recovery, he writes me weekly letters. I never asked for it, but I receive it with a silent heart. He still seeks forgiveness, and I keep offering, with a certain distance. Amanda remains in prison, awaiting trial. The Lawson were indicted, but they disappeared from the map, and honestly, they are not needed. My home is mine again. My life fit inside my chest again. And for the first time in decades, I'm just Marilyn, not the mother who serves, not the mother-in-law who gives in, not the widow who swallows her tears. Only Marilyn. Because if there's one thing I've learned on this journey, it's that true love doesn't require inhuman sacrifice. We can love deeply and still protect ourselves. Time teaches that. It teaches that blood is not synonymous with goodness. And what respect. This is the true family bond. I walked until I almost gave up my own body in the name of a love that denied me even the right to ask. But it only took a 9-year-old boy with a cell phone and a fair heart to remind me. My voice still exists. My dignity was never for sale. And if you have followed me here, thank you. Really, there are stories that we can only tell when someone really listens to us. And you stayed. You heard it. That's already more than I've received for years from those who slept under my roof. If this piece of my life touched your heart in any way, leave me a hug in the form of a like. It heats up more than you might think. And if you want to go back for another coffee, for another conversation like this from soul to soul, subscribe here to the channel. This little corner here is ours now. Tell me in the comments of which city are you listening to me. I like to imagine the distance shortening with each story we share. And it activates the bell, see? That way you don't lose when the coffee is brewed again. Because I still have a lot to tell. And the next story that is about to start here on the channel, she also speaks of silence, but of a silence that hid a secret of inheritance. A secret that almost destroyed 3 generations. Don't go away yet. Listen to the next true story that will appear on the screen. Always remember, each wrinkle tells a story, and each story carries a strength. Watch the next video here on the channel with another incredible story.